There are plenty of coasters that I've ridden that I would consider to be weaker. They have not as strong of layout or elements, and many of these rides have no redeeming qualities at all. But several of them have one element that's really stand out. These are always the best elements on these rides, and these are not all bad coasters, but they may have a bit of a weaker layout or maybe kind of overrated in my opinion. But today I'll be talking about 10 standout elements on weaker coasters that I have ridden. Alright, so starting off the top 10 is the upwards 540-degree helix on Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure. Now this is coming in last on the list because this is my favorite coaster. On the list it actually ranks 32 in my personal rankings, and it is my second favorite B&M Hyper, so it's certainly not a bad ride, but I just found this ride pretty overrated. From the disappointing drop, to the weaker airtime, to the hard-hitting mid-course brake run, to the pretty noticeable B&M rattle, I wasn't the biggest fan of this ride. I still liked it, but I just overall thought it was a bit of a weaker coaster. But this 540-degree helix is absolutely insane. It's definitely my favorite part of the ride. It lasts a solid 8 seconds. It's super forceful. It made me gray out every time. It's better than the one on Goliath over Georgia. I think that's because of the upward, the fact that it's an upward helix makes it more intense than a downward helix. But overall that ride is better because it has better airtime. But this is overall a really good helix and definitely the best element on Nitro. Another standout moment on a weaker B&M Hyper is the awesome first drop on Intimidator at CAROWINDS. Now I do like this ride more than others, and I think that's because it felt like when I rode this coaster the trims were running lighter, and I have gotten some good front row rides. But overall this ride just doesn't have that good of airtime, and the ending's very weak, and it's not super intense. It is overall a weaker Hyper, but this drop is definitely the best moment on the ride. It definitely saves it just from being kind of a bad ride, and I could definitely see why people don't really like this ride. This drop in the back row is absolutely amazing, and the front's good, but the back is definitely better, and it's definitely the best moment on Intimidator. For number 8, we'll actually be going back to Great Adventure for Superman Ultimate Flight's awesome pretzel loop. Now I do believe Superman Ultimate Flight does have one other pretty good element, and that's the back row drop is actually fairly whippy and really fun, but overall after the pretzel loop it's mostly just a bunch of kind of boring turns and a weaker inversion. This ride is really nothing special aside from the pretzel loop. That's what it's known for, and so without the pretzel loop this ride would be kind of pointless. It's definitely the best moment on the ride, and it is the just standout element on this sort of weaker coaster. Number 7 is the awesome final ejector airtime hill on Fahrenheit at Hersheypark. Now Fahrenheit's a coaster that I never understood why people liked so much. I rode this in 2017, I actually got several rides on it, but I just found it was kind of rattly, boring, forceless, and it had some pretty bad pacing issues, especially on the Cobra roll. It did have one other good moment with the Norwegian loop, but the best moment on this ride is definitely the airtime hill. It hurts, it really throws you out of your seat. It's just a crazy good moment. I'm not a huge fan of this coaster, but this element is definitely the best part on the ride, and it's definitely one of the strongest airtime moments I've ever felt. Next up is going to be another moment on a B&M, and this is the first drop on Wild Eagle at Dollywood. Now just like with Gatekeeper, I just was not a huge fan of this wing coaster. After the first drop, it was basically just kind of a bunch of forceless inversions that didn't really give great hang time. Didn't have any airtime. The ending was pretty pointless. It was just kind of bad. This drop definitely was really great. I rode in the back, and you definitely get whipped out of your seat on this drop. Some great pull. It's not super steep, but it does last a while. And at the bottom of the drop, you actually get some nice forces. So while Wild Eagle is kind of a weaker coaster, this drop is definitely the standout element of the ride, and it's actually a pretty fun first drop and a really fun moment on the ride. So number 5 is going to be, in my opinion, the best element on CHEETAH at Busch Gardens Tampa, and this is the rise into the first tower, mainly in the front row. Now CHEETAH Hunt's a coaster I just wasn't super impressed with. I got a middle row ride and a front row ride, so 2 rides on this. I just found it was mostly kind of forceless. The inversion was decent, but really not great. It just kind of had some boring turns and some decent airtime moments, but nothing too crazy, not like insane laterals or anything. But this pop of airtime in the front is actually really strong, and definitely by far the highlight of the ride. You get great ejector. This ride does have some good launches, but overall it is more of a family coaster. It's not very intense. This airtime moment in the back and in the middle it's decent, but in the front it really ejects you out of your seat, and it's definitely the standout and best element on CHEETAH. Next up is going to be another Florida coaster, and this one is fairly controversial. This is the first floater airtime hill on Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. Now I know a lot of people love Mako, and I don't blame them for that. It's just not my favorite coaster. It's my third favorite B&M Hyper, and it ranks from my number 37 spot out of my personal coasters that I've ridden, which I'm tempted to move it down. But I just found it overrated. It's far from the best B&M Hyper, and I went in with the expectations of it being the best Hyper, and I left pretty disappointed. The airtime in general was pretty weak. The second half was kind of pointless. But this first hill was definitely the best moment on the ride. It gave some good sustained floater, probably the best floater moment on a B&M Hyper. And it's really the only element on the ride that I really even like that much. The trim hill after the turnaround really killed it. The drop wasn't great. I got put in row 3 every time, so maybe if I got a better seat, I would have enjoyed Mako more, but just from my experience, this was really the only great moment on Mako. Number 3 is the 0G roll on Great Bear at Hersheypark. Now, Great Bear is a very interesting invert. It's definitely my least favorite out of the ones I've ridden, and I felt this coaster was fairly forceless. I rode in the middle, so maybe it'd be better if I rode in the back. It has a more unique layout. It's a more drawn out kind of layout that uses the terrain very well, but I don't really like it. I think just because of the fact it's more drawn out, it makes elements less intense, and really the only standout elements I found on this ride were the first helix coming off the pre-drop before the first drop in the 0G roll. This is definitely one of my favorite 0G rolls. It's crazy whippy, and it gives just a great airtime sensation. While Great Bear has a lot of weaker elements, I did find that the 0G roll is definitely the best element on the ride, and it just was not a huge fan of this coaster, but it does have this one great inversion. It is a smoother ride, so that does help it, but just not a huge fan of Great Bear, but it does have a nice 0G roll. So finally, we have the last element on a B&M coaster, and this is the 0G roll on VALRAVNS at Cedar Point. Now, a lot of you may know, especially some of the people I talk on Discord, my thoughts on this ride. It is forceless, it is boring, and it's just kind of stupid. It gives no airtime. The vest restraints completely restrict all hang time, although this 0G roll is a pretty fun element. It tries to kind of give a hang time, and it gives like a little bit, even though it's a little bit restricted. It's kind of a cool element. It has a helix coming off of it. It's kind of like a step up underflip, but not totally. But it's overall a fun kind of hang time filled inversion. And honestly, it's really the only good moment on VALRAVNS. And so finally, we have the corkscrews on Anaconda at King's Dominion. Now, I've never thought this ride was horrible, but I never thought it was too great either. Unless you sit in the front, it is pretty rough, and it does have some really bad air transitions. And like in the second half, especially during the going into the MAKOS brake run, even in the front row, the forces can kind of lurch your head forward, which is a bit uncomfortable. So really, most of the moments in this ride are bad, except for these corkscrews, which give great hang time. You actually go really slow through them. So they're pretty fun. They're definitely the most enjoyable moment of the ride. You know, it's a great hang time moment. It's really the only good moment of the ride. You know, most of the other inversions don't really give hang time, but they are pretty intense. This is honestly definitely the best element on Anaconda. It is for sure the standout element on the ride. So here you have it, some of the standout elements on some of the weaker coasters I've ridden now. As you can see, most of these are actually B&M. 7 of them were, with 2 Intimins and 1 Arrow. Now, I don't think all these rides are bad. As I mentioned, Mako and Nitro, those are some pretty good rides, but the other rides on this list honestly aren't too great. But these are all pretty good elements on these rides. So, what did you guys think of this list? Do you agree with these elements? Do you think these are weaker coasters? And do you think these are the best elements on these rides? And what are some other weaker coasters that have standout elements and what those elements are? Leave those thoughts down in the comment section below. As always, make sure to leave a like on this video and subscribe for more coaster content coming soon. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.